यहाँ हम लोग हावड़ा बाइक मैकेनिक।
Hello, hello, hello. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of my age, welcome to another episode. I don't know, like, what's the episode number, um, but let me figure this out. Can can somebody from my team tell me what episode are we on today? So, today we are going to have two gentlemen who perhaps have been solely responsible in changing the way the world actually is in the space of Web3 and crypto. The first guest we're going to have is Reeve Collins, the co founder of USDT. And the next guest that we're going to have is Yat Siu. I'm personally a big fan of Yat because the way he thinks and the way he functions and overall the way he is. So that is um, brilliant. So let's also talk about and let's figure out the way we are moving in this space, right? First thing, let's take this opportunity in sharing, you know, the work that we're doing. By the way, I just got to know from my team that today is the 24th episode of Aura 8. We started this last month, 28th of April, and today is 27th of May, and we have clocked in 24 episodes. We have been going live every single day of the week, especially the weekdays. We are going to have Yat and Reeve joining us soon. So you're most welcome to comment, because when you're commenting, we can have it displayed on our screen. So I think that will be a fun interaction. And we are live on Binance, we're live on Facebook, we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Twitter, and so on and so forth. Let's actually go ahead and share the live on Twitter so that more people get to know about it. And I'm really looking forward for everyone joining us. Um Today is Eid, by the way, so Eid Mubarak to everybody. It's a beautiful day of getting the families together. It's a beautiful day to actually start, understanding what is sacrifice, because that's how it kind of moved up in the space. And I'm personally very excited on having two very interesting people on our panel that I just mentioned a while ago. Let's quickly take this moment and share this retweet quote uh, live with Yat Sui and Reeve Collins. Okay, there we are. So that's been taken care of. I'm hoping that more of us, more people are going to join us. I'm going to quickly go to LinkedIn and also share the feed on my profile. So that would also maybe get some more attention. Okay, page post. By the way, we have been clocking some really amazing views, and all thanks to you guys out there. Uh, so I'm really pumped about this. Repost with your thoughts. Uh, Also, tell us from which part of the world are you watching us. It'll be interesting to know. Where, why there are flies everywhere? I turn on my light and somehow, there are flies in my room. Does this also happen to you? Let me know. Mm, okay. There we are. There we are. There we are. In a way, I'm glad that we are doing this at 4 p.m. Dubai, sorry, 5 p.m. Dubai time. We have 8 more minutes for them to join in. So I request everybody out there who are listening to us to go ahead and share it with all your friends so that we can actually bring in more people. The objective is actually to keep sharing this and bringing in more people. So thank you for helping me out here. And let's get this party started. For everybody who are watching us, hi, my name is Vaibhav Ali, and I have my kids fighting right now. Bye. Okay. Okay. I'm live. You guys have to leave from here. Bye. Go. This is crazy. I need to send them off, guys. So give me a moment. Let me try and take these guys off from here. What is happening here? Why are they inside? Okay, I'm back. It took me about 15 seconds to go back and get these guys out, but they're not out. They're still inside. But it's okay. It's better than uh, them talking right behind me. Work from home in a way that I never imagined. Ah, let's see, let's see, let's see, let's see. Okay, okay. So this is now live on LinkedIn too. For anybody who's watching us right now, please comment down so we can have a conversation. Uh, would love to
And
have a chat.
get these guys.
Oops, out, but they're not out. They're still inside. But it's okay. It's better than uh, them talking right behind me. Work from home. Mm, okay. Okay, so Reeve has just joined us. We're going to have Sarah come in too. Uh, hey, Reeve, how you doing?
Good, good. It's early over here, but good morning.
Good morning. Did you get a chance to grab a cup of coffee?
I did.
Hey, Reeve, how are you? Thank you for
Great.
joining in.
Yeah. It's
So,
been,
I think
Early morning. What time is it right now?
6 a.m. I'm on the West Coast.
Wow.
I usually get up around this time, but getting up and being sharp enough to be on camera is two different things.
absolutely. And
True.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. You wake up and then in just not going for your exercises or your run, and then all of a sudden you get up like, okay, fine, I have to go speak about stablecoins.
Exactly. It's all good though.
Today we have one speaker from the East Coast and the other speaker on the opposite side of the world in Hong Kong. So, that is why our timing is such. But
Yeah, that's what I figured. Like, because I realize Yat's in Asia. Is he coming on? Is it?
yeah, he is joining in a while.
Yeah.
Like
So
a
I figured
minute.
that it's going to have to be early.
So so today is going to be a 24th episode. I'm so pumped. And in the last 30 odd days, we have received over 1.8 million views on Binance Square, which is like our hero profile where we go live other than the other platforms. So that is very, interesting for us. And we want to keep pushing the momentum. And I'm glad that we have you. Earlier, we actually had Mate from bitcoin.com, and he spoke about the fork, and he spoke about what a big mistake that was, that they made.
Yeah. How big a mistake the fork was?
Yeah, and Bitcoin Cash, yeah.
Oh, it's fucking devastating. Created tons of wealth. Roger made billions of dollars, but Roger would probably give it all back to not have the battle and how. Oh, are we live? Sorry, I didn't realize.
Yeah, we are live. We are live. This is.
Oh, you didn't. Anyways, I thought we were waiting for. Okay. Well, do you want to start? Do you want to do an intro and start this off, or we just kind of dive in and have a conversation? I wasn't.
Well, the way we do it is, as we were doing, because we like having very organic conversations. And just a note to all our viewers who are watching us, and all our past speakers and our future speakers who would be featured on the show. We have no script. We have no questions that is given to the speakers. So please don't ask me for questions. We have no, set of questions. We like to take the conversation as organically as possible, and then we build on it, because I personally feel that real is more fascinating than real, right? So that's the way we do it here. And I think we will have Yat joining us in a bit. So Sarah, if you can just follow up on Yat quickly for me,
Yes, I
please.
just did. I just did with Yat's team, and they said that
Okay.
Yat is coming in. He needs 2 minutes to join in.
Okay, so great. So let's start with Reeve here, and few days ago we actually had Bandeep come in, and we spoke a lot about the yield-bearing stable coins, and you and I earlier did have a conversation, I think last year at Future Blockchain Summit, regarding the future of stables, and but then overall, if you look at it, can you please break something down for us, that do we really need different kind of stables, or should we just be happy with the existing ones? Because the same thing goes with blockchain, right? We have got multiple and different kind of blockchains, and then we have L2, but how many really survive? So what do you think, Reeve?
Do you need more than one news station, or is it nice to have different perspectives? So because every stable coin is different, it has different features, functionalities, and caters to different audiences. And I truly believe that over time you'll see a lot more stable coins coming to market. I believe that every large ecosystem will issue its own stable coin. And the reason being, because there's new technology out there, the concept of stablecoin 2.0, where the collateral is on chain and transparent, where the yield is stripped from that asset and provided to the user programmatically, meaning the issuer can control who gets it and how much. And so there's high levels of customization that can take place with stablecoins. That being the case, every ecosystem is going to issue one, because it provides more value to their consumers and it provides more value to them. So when you say, do we need more? Absolutely. They're going to be customized, but at the end of the day, they're going to be essentially fungible. So you'll be able to easily swap them out. So the consumers will still have kind of that seamless experience. They'll have a dollar. It might be called different things because it's a dollar that works in different communities, that's optimized for different communities. But at the end of the day, it's $1 worth of value that they get to transact with. And when they transact with it in their community, they get extra benefits, either more yield or rewards or something like that. Why? Because we're doing all this work to make money programmable. And when money's programmable, you can do these amazing things with it.
Fantastic.
Right.
And I'm
Welcome, Yat.
Hey there.
Hello,
How are
Yat.
you?
How are you?
Hi there. Hi
All
there.
well, all well. How are you?
Good. I just came back from Japan, so it's like running around all over the place. But yes, hey, how is everyone?
good. Yeah, good to see you. As I was saying a little earlier, that today is the 24th episode of Aura 8. This actually, the idea of going live stream started, I think, last month in April, when Yat and we were supposed to go live and talk about, about Animoca Mines. But for some weird reason, I canceled. I don't know how. I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it on my own. But the call got cancelled, and I was like, how did this happen? And then maybe my AI agents had some role to play in it. But from there, we actually went ahead and built an entire ecosystem of us going live. Today is the 24th episode. We have been going live every single day on Binance Square and on the other social media platforms. And in the last 30 days, we have clocked over 1.8 million views on Binance. So, Yat, I think this credit also goes to you. And I just see my son walking in the diaper.
It's serendipity. Serendipity. You never know what happens. I remember when we I think you drove me in. What was it, like some your car, some banged up car? I forgot what it was, and we had some. I think we had
Yes.
some milk tea. That's right, and then you did some recordings there as well. I think that was like 3 years ago or something. Anyway, that was a while ago, but yes.
Actually, yeah. So, just to give Reeve the context, I was away from Dubai for 6 months, and then when I came back, my aircon wasn't working, but I had to go to an event. So I said, okay, let me figure it out in the evening. So I just got the car cleaned, and I went to the venue. I met Yat, and we were going to another event venue. And I said, hey, Yat, come with me. I'll drive you. But the moment my car came in from valet, I realized the aircon in my car is not working, and I was so embarrassed.
In Dubai, yeah, of all
That's
places.
pretty painful.
Yes.
So I look at Yat, and I look at the car, and I said, hey, Yat, can I book a cab for you? Because I knew the aircon wasn't working. But Yat was so kind. He said, it's all right. Let's go, because the venue is not too far. What's happening today? Why is everybody walking in? So then we actually had a great conversation about family, about kids, about everything. And then I realized, hey, you know what? We should actually go ahead and do a podcast. And we actually shot some amazing episodes with Yat, with guys like David Chum and the others. So, thank you, Yat, once again. And today we have the panel for Stablecoins. We have Reeve, the co-founder of USDT. We have, Reeve is also the chairman of STBL and the mind behind VFi on-chain banking vision. Reeve Collins, thank you so much. He is up. All thanks to Yat at 6 a.m. in the morning, because we couldn't get your timelines together because you're in Hong Kong and Reeve is at in East Coast.
Worked out well. It's great
Yes.
great to be here now. Yeah.
Yes, and on the regulated HK stable banking side, the man who helped land one of the first HKMA stable licenses through Anchor Point with Standard Chartered and HKT, the executive chairman of Animoca Brands, Yat. A big welcome to both of you out there. I can't tell you how happy I am to have two legend OGs, because the word OG is become so overused in our space, but then both of you are the OGs here. Yat, let me begin with you, and let's talk about Anchor Point's telco bank backbone with HKT in giving you something more, something about the projects that only can dream of, right? Because you have instant distribution of millions of Hong Kong mobile users, and even I'm one of them. I hope my number is still active. But I've been watching how the infrastructure could completely reshape cross-border flows. So I'm curious, how do you see the same infrastructure flipping across border payrolls and remittances corridor in the Middle East, Southeast Asia over the next 36 months?
So I mean, I think Anchor Point ran a trial run already with some Hong Kong exchanges. I think that was announced, I think, last week. So hopefully that deployment will sort of execute fairly quickly. This is, of course, a little bit different here in that it is a regulated stablecoin, in the sense that it's obviously under the HKMA. There are different things to sort of, I guess, similar to when you get a stablecoin that will be sort of in the US under the Genius Act, probably by next year. There are sort of different type of rules and regulations one has to sort of comply with. In Hong Kong, there were two parties that received it. So one was our joint venture, Anchor Point, and then the other one is, HSBC. And I think you can expect, similarly to many other places in the world that will eventually have, regulated stablecoins. I do think more and more countries are going to be looking at their own stablecoins, because at minimum, I think it's going to be, it's viewed in many places as something that's important for sovereignty. Money is perhaps one of the most important sovereign assets one can think of. So I think I expect sort of more countries to basically do something in that vein. But there's not too much I can sort of share in terms of some of the specifics, except that obviously stablecoin usage is about distribution, about flows, about basically sort of making commerce more seamless. One of the sort of very big popular corridors from at least a general, more consumer perspective, is, for instance, sort of the trade between money that's flowing basically from Hong Kong into places like the Philippines or Indonesia, because there's a lot of Filipinos and Indonesian let's call it workers here in Hong Kong, right? And I guess it's maybe similar to Dubai and sort of people from India as well, or stablecoins and broadly speaking, sort of token-based assets are just a great way to sort of transfer money across or transfer value across, especially if you need to sort of control them and manage them. It's not just about, hey, can I send it cheaper? It's, to Reeve's earlier point about programmable money, you can send them with conditions. And one of the famous conditions for everyone who knows what it's like to basically be, working in the domestic field in Hong Kong as a Filipina generally, or, as an Indonesian person, sending money back has always been problematic, because who is the money being sent back to? And there's a joke, and I don't mean to offend any Filipinos, but it's a bit of a trope here, right? Which is, if all women stop working in the Philippines, the saying goes, I think the Filipino economy will grind to a halt in 5 days or something. And again, it's a little bit sort of exaggerated and unfair, because of course there's a lot of hardworking Filipino men as well. But I think it comes from the fact that so much money is being sent back from these Filipino women who work here, and it goes to typically the husband, who very often, and again, I want to be careful about generalizing, but who very often basically don't have to work, and then do stuff with the money that's not perhaps the intended purpose, because it's not straightforward to send money to 5 different parties, or with conditions or so on. With blockchain, you can do very, very easily, where I can the person who sends the money is in control of how and who the money gets distributed to, in essentially an extremely low-cost manner, from an efficiency standpoint, and also in a transparent manner. So that's these use cases. But I think the thing that we're most excited about isn't the stuff that we can imagine right now. It's all the stuff we can imagine, right? I mean, who imagined all the stuff that is happening in DeFi? Now you have an infrastructure that basically has money that you use commonly available to anyone to basically compose and build cool applications on top. Like literally, your 16-year-old or your 12-year-old can probably vibe code an application that can use money in some form or fashion. That is exciting, right? And we can talk about sort of other type of tokens you can use as the early experiment, but still in society that money is not stable in the classic sense, because it's not the money that you can use to buy your groceries. It's not the money that I use to get my salary. It's not the money that I'm used for the typical stuff. So stablecoins really fulfill that role and allows people to create some very, very cool stuff. So I expect all sorts of new applications that we can't think of that will emerge because of things like stablecoins.
This is very interesting. By the way, I when Yat talks about the Filipinos working in Hong Kong, I have a very interesting experience. I was walking down around Hong Kong Central on a Sunday, and I couldn't understand why there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Filipinos just chilling on the streets. I couldn't understand. Now, I come from India, and I thought that, is it some kind of a protest? Is this some kind of where people are just gathering together for a riot? Or I didn't know what was really happening, and then I realized that these are the migrant workers who are just chilling out on a Sunday. So very well said.
It's a day off. It's a day off. Yeah,
it's a day off.
Yeah. And for context, there's about 200,000+ Filipinos in Hong Kong. So that probably puts them amongst the largest expat community, if you want to call it that, at least foreign community in Hong Kong.
That is interesting, because and also they run a parallel economy there. There are people who are actually doing makeshift beauty parlor arrangements. They are selling thrift shoes there. Something or the other is happening. And
I mean, I say this jokingly, but only half jokingly. At some point, someone is going to probably launch some kind of L2, L3 specifically for Filipinas in Hong Kong, because it is actually, you probably get a lot of actual on-chain usage relative elsewhere. So it's interesting, because it is, to your point, it is a microcosm of a very significant economic force that typically sends most of the money back to the Philippines. And it's such an important part of the capital that flows back to the Philippines, that they're actually, you know, a bit of a voice. So it's definitely interesting.
True. Reeve, let me come over to you and find out, you know, the stablecoins 2.0 plus the yield split is beginning to live in the most interesting innovation era we have seen in the space this year. Is it already changing how people think about everyday stablecoin usage? Uh, my question is basically, you know, what is the exact neobank feature roadmap that turns everyday user in emerging markets into high yield liquidity providers within the next 18 months?
It's a big question, and you're saying a lot there. But you know, when you're talking about everyday users and where the market's at now, like the general market's still just catching up, because what everyone's been talking about recently is regulation. And so a lot of people say regulation slows everything down, and in one sense it does. But more importantly, regulation determines who gets to participate. In the past, it was the visionaries and the companies that were very early, the pioneers that really wanted to build something different to kind of pave the way and show what can be done. Since it's money, it's taken a very long time for the world to catch up and to accept that there's a new way to move it, because it's the most coveted asset there is. But now we're there. And so regulation's finally catching up. And as Yat shared about doing a regulated stablecoin, so they're taking the most primitive version of a stable coin, and because they're just finally comfortable at even dipping their toe in this area, regulating it and providing it to the users. And the fact that there's now a regulated stable coin, because if you think about it, all those 200,000 Filipinos in Hong Kong could have been sending money home for the last decade, almost instantly and for free, right? For a decade, 10 years. It's not a new innovation. However, it's complex. The ease of use is not there, and they're just not familiar or comfortable with it. And that's where, for that type of audience, for the mass audience, where regulation comes in. And I started the answer to your question out with regulation, because what you're talking about, the stuff that I'm focused on now, which is like Stablecoin 2.0, again, that's on the cutting edge. So that's going to take a little while for everyone to catch up. But with Stablecoin 2.0, it's an upgrade to what stablecoins are. To simplify it, it makes them more programmable. So as you shared, you can really control how it's distributed. It gives a lot more customization and control to the issuers and the users of that stablecoin. Also, it enables you to use new types of collateral, or I should say or collateral that's going to be more transparent. So the next big wave is taking assets, traditional assets, and putting them on new rails. And what is that called? It's called an RWA. People feel like this RWA term is this new asset class or this new strange term, but it's traditional assets on new rails. Just like a dollar is a traditional asset on new rails. A dollar in stablecoins is an RWA, tokenizing the dollar. This RWA move is tokenizing other assets. When those other assets are tokenized, they come on chain, they make much more transparent collateral. They provide more utility, more use cases for traditional assets. Therefore, new assets will be built from them because they're on chain, because they're programmable. And when they're programmable, they're more customizable to the individual. So that's Stablecoin 2.0. It's upgrading this shift to stablecoins. It's upgrading the rails, the infrastructure that is stablecoins. And then you also mentioned neobanks. Well, neobank is upgrading banking infrastructure. If you think about a neobank, they've been around for a decade as well. And what did a neobank do? It upgraded the interface. It moved the interface from a traditional bank branch that you had to walk into to your phone. So when you don't have to go, when you're not location dependent anymore, a lot more people could use a neobank versus a traditional bank because it was on their phone. The neobank, which is another term we coined, which is decentralized on-chain bank, upgrades the rails. So the interface has already been upgraded. So we use that interface, which is your phone and an app, but the rails are now upgraded. So the neobank, or what WeFi is bringing to the market, is the infrastructure below that easily allows banks to plug into on-chain financial capabilities. So that's where I believe the future is going, which is Everyone in the world who has access to a cell phone has high quality financial services in their pocket.
Nice. Yat, you were mentioning about the HKD stables being programmable. With all of this as mentioned, so you're saying that if I'm sending the money back home, or let's talk about the Filipino lady sending the money back home, she can actually say that, I don't want my husband to buy alcohol, for example. From this, is this what you mean? Like you can control how
I mean,
the money
so
is spent?
I mean, you can go all the way with this because it is programmable, right? But it's more likely going to be that there's a certain amount of money that gets distributed. Because normally when you think of the easiest format is rather than the money going into one hand who controls it on a monthly basis, it gets distributed how it's intended to, like so much for my children, or so much for my mother, or so much for my husband, or whatever that is distributed, rather than having one household manage it per se. Right. And then there's also the transparency as to how it gets spent. So there's definitely that element. But I think it is not that we ourselves would be necessarily providing the application. It's that someone else is going to be able to create that application, and they're going to build a business maybe on top of that, and maybe take a small fee or a tiny commission because it might be valuable for a certain set of people. I mean, at the end of the day, there is not just Filipinos in Hong Kong, but there's Singapore and Taiwan, and of course Dubai as well, and elsewhere, right? So from a global standpoint, probably talking millions and millions in the same category who need a problem solved for that. And the second part, of course, is that we make the assumption that they all are banked back home, but that's not necessarily true, right? And the reason why the middlemen come into play, why people still use equivalents of Western Union, is because money is delivered to the villages that do not have a bank account, right? And so now you literally, I mean, to Reeve's point, right? Essentially, it's kind of banking in your pocket, as in, everyone can almost be like a quasi bank of some sort. They can create these type of rules within them, right? So our expectation is that, by the kind of sort of capabilities that someone will build, we will not necessarily forecast exactly what that looks like, but we do think that someone will build an application and make a business out of it. Right now, because of the fact that money was not programmable before, for the most part, the application is simply remittance. That's really it. Sending from point A to point B, and without specific conditions. And the conditions were typically lawyers and escrows and contracts. Those were the ones that were sort of think about the inefficiency of that, right? And now you can have all of that contained. The final point is that we're getting to the point where AI agents are just so good at coding and programming and developing stuff that, again, if it's small amounts of money, the kind of security that is needed for smart contract auditing, which eventually I think AI agents will be very, very good at as well. But, let's call them less safe at this moment in time. From a POC to basically finally bulletproofing that stuff, we're going to get into very, very strong, basically, let's call them sort of, money rails that are going to be developed by AI agents for people who just simply are imagining things they have to do.
Like Reeve, I have this question for Reeve. Some critics say that the neobanks like VeFi are basically their DeFi trying to dress up as a bank. Then the yields bearing split meant to solve trust, but it also echoes that some early Tether conversations on it. So what do you think, the yield bearing split actually solves trust issues, or does it just introduces the same opacity that Tether faced early on?
Well, you're mixing a few different concepts there. So no, yield bearing or splitting the yield and sharing the yield does not solve trust. It just improves the product. It allows the consumers to receive some of the yield. The part that solves trust, that solves the opacity, and is simply the fact that we're now using RWAs as collateral. So take the traditional stablecoin like Tether or Circle. They hold all of their reserves off chain in some bank, actually in hundreds of banks or tons of banks around the world. Let's put it that way. And so to do that type of audit, it's quite complex. And therefore it's taken years and years for Tether to really deliver a solid audit, as well as the rest of these companies. And then you have to trust the company that audited it, right? We've eliminated all of that. The fact that treasuries are tokenized, then you can see how many treasuries are there and they're on chain at all times. So all of the collateral is now on chain. That's what solves the trust issue. And then the yield splitting issue solves the fact of who benefits. Splitting the yield from stablecoins and allowing it to be programmatically distributed to those people who you want it to, right? To the consumers, to the people who put it in to the system. That just creates more functionalities and makes a better product at the end of the day. And most importantly, it delivers on the promise of Web3. So I think, you know, Yat and I have been touting Web3 and what it's going to do for the world for many, many years. And we've both been committed to delivering on that promise. And this is one step in that right direction, which is the people that put the value into the community should be the ones receiving the value. And so now we have the technology to truly do it. And that's why I call it Stablecoin 2.0, because I believe it's a movement. And while we were the first to create that movement, I think a lot of companies will be fast followers because the consumers are going to demand it. And we're all in Web3. So we should be delivering on that promise.
Yat, if I give you an opportunity to ask any question to Reeve, what would that be?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess the most obvious question for me would be, obviously, you know, I mean, being involved sort of, you know, at the early days of Tether, seeing where stablecoins are emerging right now, you know, basically you've helped birth a giant in the space. And now you're kind of going, I'm not sure if you want to say going to battle with them, but in a sense you are, right? Right? So I guess how you feel about that. And the second point, I guess, would be, why do you think you will succeed? And maybe it's not to say that there has a choice between just one or the other, but you are going against a behemoth. And maybe the additional question is that, you know, with the Genius Act coming into play, probably by next year, there's going to be probably many, many more stablecoins, big and small. There's going to be all sorts of tech company stablecoins combined with banks stablecoins, right? So it's going to be an interesting mix. So I would love to also have your take, especially from a US standpoint, where you think it's going to be beyond buying American debt, of course. You know?
Exactly. And let's hope it's more than just buying debt, right? It's about upgrading the entire financial infrastructure globally, providing new rails. And that's what we're here to do. You know, I don't look at it as competing with Tether. I look at it as upgrading the system. So Tether is obviously extraordinary. It's the 900-pound giant in the room. But they have such massive reach. But over time, I think they'll also eventually, I would hope, upgrade their product offering. I think all stablecoins will eventually have to figure out how to use this technology to best benefit its consumers. And that's obviously by rewarding them more. And when you're saying, how do you compete? Because I wholeheartedly agree that with the Clarity Act coming, that there'll be thousands of stablecoins. We kind of touched on that earlier, right before you hopped on. I believe that every large ecosystem is going to issue its own currency. Because what's happening with this regulation and with financial services truly becoming commoditized, because what's also happening is this move to AI. And when you have agents make all your transactions, agents don't care about brands. They care about the best product and the transaction that's most rewarding for their master. Like who's directing that AI to make a transaction? Whatever is most rewarding for that person, that's where the AI is going to route that transaction. And that person's going to say, well, I want it routed this direction because I have an affinity to this brand or to this ecosystem. And let's say I'm a big sports team fanatic, or I'm a huge gamer. I'm really into this gaming ecosystem. That gaming ecosystem is probably going to allow that consumer to transact. Why? Because in the future, they're going to be able to plug in complete financial services with a button, right? Just, oh, let's add this plugin, and now you can do transactions because this is where you're playing your games. You might as well make your transactions with the push of the button. So when the rails truly are commoditized and they're plugged into every large distribution system, then the agents will route those transactions where the consumers are, or the consumer's going to route the transactions where they want their most rewards. So that being said, what I'm focused on building is the protocols and the infrastructure for that. So while I have my own stablecoin USST, that's a universal stablecoin that sits below these ecosystem specific stablecoins. So for instance, if you have a large, which you have many large gaming ecosystems, and they want to issue a stablecoin, they can easily plug into my protocol to issue that. And I believe that the approach that we're taking, this stablecoin 2.0 approach, is much better than what else is offered in the industry, not just a little bit, but 10x, which is what's required for people to actually use a new type of technology. And so I believe we really have a competitive moat to be the technology that AI chooses, because the communities choose to use our protocol and use the type of vaults and the programmability that we offer. So that's really the focus. It's to the end of the day to introduce this upgrade to how stable coins are essentially programmed, how the collateral comes and how the yield gets distributed.
I mean, I think it's interesting also because, one of our big thesis points in the future is classic forms of distribution and discovery will change because of AI agents. And so at the end of the day, the AI agent is only going to search what is best, right? It's like best yield, safe yield as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to prove to an agent, it's almost like, we do smart contract and basically security audits really to try to prove to human-run exchanges and human-run platforms that it's safe to do business with it, right? Eventually, this is actually not for humans, it's for agents. And if an agent can tell, and I think one of the great equalizers here is that scale and size matters for liquidity, and liquidity is its own form of scale and distribution. But there's a point where, for a lot of people, if the product, I think, is going to do much better things, even though the liquidity is smaller, given the choice, if the AI agent can deem with its own intelligence that, hey, this is safe enough because it's got $1 billion. So yeah, sure, I'm not going to transact, maybe, like I don't know, like $500 million on it in one go. But for $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, I'm more than happy to use that pool because it seems safer or because it has better yield. And the agent's going to do that. And I think the human in the loop is not even going to necessarily know what that is, right? And I think it's also interesting because currencies used to be, banks used to issue all their own currencies, right? It's like days before the Fed. And so, but again, that was a human constraint, how to manage it all. And perhaps an AI agent is going to sort of, abstract all of that anyway. And you're dealing with a dollar. It's just which is the most efficient dollar. Are we going to be attached to the brand of the dollar beyond that? Or is the agent just going to be spending a dollar and just finding the best yield for the dollar, right? So.
Absolutely. The agent's going to do whatever its person told it to do. And that's where the affinity to the communities come into play. And so I absolutely believe that's the future. And that's what we're building towards, is really something that's optimized for agents. And that's a real protocol that offers the best yield or whatever that community wants to offer its users. So that's what
intersection.
Sorry, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is a question for you. The intersection of gaming, digital identity, and then stable coins, that feels like one of the biggest untapped opportunities right now. So especially with Animoca's ecosystem.
So I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. I think the microphone, I don't know maybe if it's just me or others.
No.
Yeah.
Even we can hear you. I think your microphone is blocked. Okay.
Let me rejoin.
This is better. This is better. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
No.
No?
Try.
Hey, Yat, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my question was on the intersection of gaming, digital identities, and the stablecoins. That feels like one of the biggest untapped opportunities right now, especially the Animoca's ecosystem. I'd love to hear your take on that. Will anchor points regulated rails with gaming and digital identity ecosystems?
Okay, so I think what I heard was talk about gaming, a little bit about anchor point, and so digital identity. So maybe I'll just sort of quickly phrase it on the stablecoin opportunity that we see, at least in Hong Kong, isn't specifically just on the gaming side. It's just broad for everything, right? And gaming is one of those applications that could be used from a consumer standpoint. But it's really around, in many ways, doing a regulated stablecoin is about also distributing trust, right? People trust a certain currency, and that currency in itself basically provides for a consumer onboarding or even an agentic onboarding, because they say, okay, I trust that this is regulated. I know that this is okay. I know there's liquidity. I know there's a bank behind it or whatever, right? So these are all things that help basically the onboarding mission. One important clarification on the Hong Kong dollar stablecoin is Hong Kong dollars is actually a peg to the US dollar and has really been pretty much since inception. And so it is if you want to put it this way, the OG stablecoin of sorts, right? And it's actually defended that peg incredibly well, historically speaking, when you think about sort of some of the things that happened, like the Asian monetary crisis back in the day, amongst other things, right? Where pretty much a lot of sort of Asian currencies, like the Thai baht or Malaysia, I mean, they all depegged. But Hong Kong was sort of the one that sort of proved that test of time. So it's probably one of the safest currencies sort of out there. So I do expect, and tactically that's been important for Hong Kong to be a trade hub as well. So it was a very deliberate decision to have Hong Kong basically be sort of pegged to the US dollars, which I think a lot of people don't really maybe know that, because they look at Hong Kong and they say, oh, China is associated with China. It's entirely different when it comes to at least the currency system, and that is what gives Hong Kong its very special flavor as an international hub, amongst other things. In terms of gaming, so maybe I'll sort of answer this slightly differently, which is that when you think about everything that we've done in blockchain, whether it's digital identity, whether it's the sort of stuff we did with gaming, which by the way has morphed and changed quite a bit, right? Which again, stables are a big use case for them as well in different ways. Like when people talk about GameFi, really what we're talking about is gamified finance, as opposed to bringing finance into games per se, right? And that will come, but it's just, the industry had suffered a lot of siege. We were under siege as an industry. First, it was obviously all the frauds that happened that gave sort of people lost confidence in. But then the second one was also, sort of Gensler and the SEC were basically sort of hounding every project, big and small. And so as a result, it sort of killed a lot of innovation in this space. So this is all kind of coming back. But all this technology that is being built up, we believe actually the real use case, and this goes where gaming comes in as well, is actually going to start to really accelerate when we see agents become much more prevalent. I think we can imagine a future where there's going to be, like if I have to ask you the question, most people here will probably agree that they're going to have maybe 3 or 5 agents, maybe 10 agents. I have over 200. I expect to have many more. And I think, depending where you are, if you're in San Francisco, everyone's thinking hundreds or thousands. If you're somewhere else a little bit more conservative, you might be thinking, you may be thinking single digits or maybe low double digits. But either way, it's more than one human. Right? So you do the math, and you have 50 to 100 billion, maybe 200 billion agents roaming the world, and they're going to be doing sort of interesting stuff. And in order to be sovereign and transact in money, they need to have a wallet. Certainly a bank can be can't do that. And of course, what money will they use? They're probably in the beginning going to be using a stable coin, but in the future, I think they're going to be using all sorts of tokens, which is also why we believe altcoins broadly as a space will find a real sort of PMF in utility because of agents. Because one of the things, a lot of people sort of are looking at the market and saying, oh, it hasn't grown and so forth. On the institutional side, it's grown because people are buying Bitcoin from the institutional side for the ETFs. But obviously, altcoins don't fit that. That's because on-chain usage, and I want to exclude the people who are buying in exchanges, which has been growing, but people who are being on-chain hasn't really grown significantly since the days of NFTs and the metaverse. And I think this is important for people to understand that the on-chain economy in broad numbers hasn't grown in a significant manner since 22, and actually has suffered a little bit of a drawdown for a variety of reasons, and there's other factors as well, where, for instance, people who use Polymarket don't necessarily know that there's blockchain technology in the back. So that means the money that's sitting there isn't moving around into different DeFi pools or different opportunities. Whereas when NFTs were hot, right, nobody in the NFT space necessarily, not all, but some of them weren't thinking to themselves that they're basically, DeFi platforms as well. In fact, basically when people got an airdrop, it helped basically grow things like Uniswap and all the DeFi pools and move money on chain, right? So the activity really sort of flowed around, and there was a lot of sort of network activity and network effects that were formed outside of the system that was being built. So it was much more open. Whereas today, not necessarily intentionally, but maybe a little bit so, there's very little incentive for Polymarket, for someone who has money in Polymarket, to actually sort of for Polymarket to encourage you to move it on, off chain or something, or on chain to some other DeFi pool or something. They want you to keep the money there and keep sort of basically doing prediction market betting or that kind of stuff that you're doing over there, right? And so that's shaped and changed as well. Where even though it's on chain, a lot of that activity is unknown to that, and I think that's where the value capture has been split out a little bit, right? And that's also because of human inertia, right? I got stuff that's sitting there on Polymarket. I use it for prediction markets. I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, what happens if I put yield over there or do that kind of stuff? But you give it to an AI agent, they're just going to basically do it for you. And you can still do all of your happy prediction market stuff without actually having to worry that, you have to sort of, sign here, move the money there, do the transfer, all that stuff that, from an on-chain standpoint is safe and secure, but difficult and complex or annoying to do for an end user, is something that an agent will just do for you transparently, right, and better over time, right? So we think that's where the big space is going to grow ultimately from an on-chain activity standpoint. And so all the experiences that we have, like now we can transact trillions of dollars on chain, right? That wasn't possible before. Like 10 years ago, actually more like 7 or 8 years ago, CryptoKitties melted Ethereum with millions of dollars of sales. Okay, and now with stablecoins and all the various L1, L2s, we can easily transact trillions of dollars, no problem, no questions asked. And so we're now at a point where let 100 billion agents bloom, so to speak, and that in itself, I think, is going to sort of really drive the industry forward in a really, really big way.
My next question is to Reeve. Reeve, a few banks are now allowed to issue stables, which actually changes the whole competitive landscape. My question is, in a world where banks are now legally issuing stables, do you see pure permissionless DeFi eventually getting regulated out of the high yield game?
I think there will always be a market for permissionless DeFi, but when more traditional assets get regulated, then on-chain, like RWAs or traditional assets coming on chain via RWAs, those pools and those types of investments grow and grow because that's such a bigger market than the what's now a niche, these DeFi pools. But what you're really getting at is it's about changing the rails. What do traditional investment firms do? Really, they sell investments. All they're doing is looking for customers to put more money into their investment. What is an RWA? It's a new rail that provides more access to consumers to invest in those things, right? So when all these investments now have ways to be, right now, to get a lot of these high quality traditional investments, you have to have high minimums, you have to go through all of this extensive KYC, you might have to be in the US or in a developed nation. All those things kind of disappear, or I should say they materially shift. So now a lot more people have access to it and you can make an investment for $1. So now the traditional banks are excited because their audience just grows. The amount of money that can go into those investments grow. And so we're really upgrading the rails for traditional investments. That's what an RWA is. And so when you're talking about DeFi, that's people trying to earn yield in these new ways because they never had access to other types of investments, a lot of the people that are really into DeFi. And so now we're just going to put more high quality, more safer investments on the rails that are accessible to everybody. And you also mentioned about like banks issuing their stable coins. A bank, soon people won't think, oh, a bank issued a stable coin. All they're going to think is that the service banks offer is now, you can now move money globally, instantly, and programmatically. And so the services gets better. So that's really at the end of the day, the consumer wins. That's where we're going.
I've been seeing this in my past streams that stable coins are now going to be in the mainstream. We have Y Combinator, we have Facebook now actually going out and giving out their grants in stables, which in turn is going to cause a massive network effect around the world, whether the startup is using a dev in India or in Vietnam, so on and so forth. We will see the trickle down effect of stables going absolutely ballistic and mainstream. I think the same thing happened with Bitcoin. I know a few people who actually, uh, you know, uh, got paid in Bitcoins back in the day. So I think we will see a similar effect. But then, yet, the distribution has been a biggest challenge for DeFi. With a telco bank hybrid like Anchor Point, the last mile feels almost solved, right? It almost seems like you have cracked the code for distribution. Do you believe crypto native DeFi will be able to compete on a distribution game against a telco hybrid like yours? Or is the last mile always going to be, or rather, will always belong to the regulated players?
Okay, so first, we haven't rolled it out yet. So the jury is out. So just to be clear here, so I wouldn't say that we've cracked anything per se. Although obviously we're hopeful that there's going to be reach and distribution. But the goal really for the stablecoin is to onboard sort of the world into Web3. That to us feels like a natural sort of step. You enter the world of crypto through digital assets, through stablecoins. It's a medium, like I look at stablecoins and in some ways RWAs as well, but I see their vector a little bit different as essentially the skeuomorphic interface for money into the digital asset world kind of thing, right? So most people don't understand NFTs. They don't understand meme coins. They don't, and some cases there's nothing to understand, just to be clear, okay? But there are some things that are interesting in the space, right? How many people buy Bitcoin because they understand what it stands for, or at least what it's meant to be? They're buying it because they think it might go up, or they're shorting it because they think it might go down. Like it's they're or Ethereum the same, or Solana the same. They're not necessarily measuring fundamentals or thinking about 10 years down the road what it means in the world. When certain things do seem certain, like for instance, will the US keep printing money? Probably, right? But how many people, when they make these decisions about why they're buying, let's say, a Bitcoin, are actually really thinking about that? This is where the space has changed, right? The space has changed where the group of us who were in the space really believed in sovereignty, and by sovereignty it means sort of sovereign ownership of our assets, over the quality of our things, versus right now we have the asset really being sort of used by a mixture of Wall Street and speculators to basically trade, sentiment and ideas on them in a way where Bitcoin has kind of become a little bit of a, funnily enough, it's now treated as a risk asset because of the institutions, when in fact Bitcoin was supposed to be the opposite in a way, at least in digital asset parlor, right? But in terms of sort of cracking the code, I just go back to what I said earlier. Their technology that will be used, but I think really, we do believe in an on-chain economy, and we think on-chain is where we'll see most of the growth happening in the future. But it will come through agents, is what we believe, and that's because agents can abstract the stuff. Like my mom is not going to buy crypto on-chain because regardless of what wallet experience she has to do, it's an experience too much, relatively speaking, right? But if I can use it with the oldest interface in the world, which is my voice, or maybe my texting it, and it basically does a transaction for me and handles things for me and can security audit things for me, then I can very easily start focusing not on how to buy it, but what to use it for, right? Or why should I buy it, right? And this is kind of where we need to get into it. Like in the early days of the internet, many people, and I see this a little bit with the open claw movement in the early days as well, the agents, we fall in love with the process of getting there, which is fine. That's cool. But for most people, it's not the sort of, how do I get online and then, oh, this is cool, what I do, nothing much to do just yet. Right? For most of them, they have a goal, they have an outcome. They want to, succeed in something, whether it's fun or entertainment or utility, right? And because it has been difficult for most humans to get to the utility of the thing you can do on chain, let's say even DeFi, Okay, so for DeFi, you need a wallet. All right, fine. Which wallet? Okay, lots of wallets, right? I need to remember seed phrase. Okay, easy, but hey, still a hassle, right? And now I need gas. Oh shit, what's that? And so these steps, we haven't solved these steps yet, and there is a reason why they haven't been solved this way. We can abstract it and make it easier, but part of the reason we haven't solved it is because the entire mechanism of what makes blockchain work requires these things for its security layer, right? And in the same way that when we transact on a centralized exchange or we transact something with money in the bank, there's this whole layer in the back end that transacts it securely that you don't have to worry about, but you just trust the system because it generally works really, really well, right? And then for DeFi, precisely because it is decentralized, right, you need a decentralized solution for that safety and security, which I think is AI agents, right? And so from that, we'll be able to do all sorts of really cool things where I have self-custody, but also all the empowerment that can take place, right? So that is, I think, where it's ultimately gonna come to, where we're going to run sort of 1 million custom applications for 1 million people that are transacting money in one form or the other, and stablecoins are going to be powering a lot of it on the back, but will open the gateway then to other asset classes, because the AI agent will also be able to tell you what is good or what isn't good, or how you should be doing it, or what you might be thinking about, right? Because I know I've been blabbing on a bit. I think the one thing I do want to say is, what's missing in our space today in terms of growth and opportunity is we got to make it fun for the consumer again. It's not fun. It's very tradfi. It's very like I was like in consensus, right? I think it's the most suits I've seen in the crypto conference, right? But again, nothing wrong with that. We want the suits to come in, and we want them to basically legitimize the space. But what was the biggest on-chain growth from a consumer standpoint? It was the metaverse. It was NFTs. It was games. And some people say, it's all rubbish and whatever. But hey, it was fun. People would join the space because it was entertaining, because we had fun, we made friends, we made community, right? It's not necessarily always about what's your yield and how much profit do you make. I mean, yes, of course, it's great, but do we hang around dinner conversations and say, how much money did you make every single day, right? No, we want to talk about, some silly stuff and some fun and some entertainment. We're watching a TV show, right? That's entertaining. For how many hours do we waste our lives on things like Emily in Paris or like Game of Thrones? You name the show, right? That's productive hours technically wasted that you could be making yield, right? But no, you do that and you talk about it with your friends, right? So we need to bring that back, right? And I think that's the thing that's missing in the space. And again, we need to make it easy, but we need to make it fun as well.
Reeve, if given the opportunity, would you like to ask a question to Yat? Because Yat asked you a question and you answered it so well, and perhaps you even turned it into a pitch, but then do you have a question for Yat?
Absolutely. Look, I loved what you talked about earlier about GameFi. It's gamifying finance. It's not adding finance to games. And that's kind of what you're just alluding to right there. You have to make it fun. And and you're right, like prior to NFTs and the metaverse, the only thing you could do on chain was make yield, was really invest back then, because that was also prior to DeFi. And so it was just buy speculation on tokens. And then it opened up the world to non-financial people, to collectors and gamers. And so it really, that is where that huge influx of consumers got on chain, which was amazing. And so, yeah, I'd love to know what your focus is around gamifying finance. Like how do you see that unfolding?
Yeah. So thanks for the setup. but I think the first thing, what we found, and I think the same will be here, is that we have to recognize that the vast majority of the world is not actually financially literate, right? And I think that's fine. That's the opportunity. We have to bring them on board. And that, by the way, is why I'm so excited about crypto and DeFi broadly. Because if we're only fighting with the same pool, and by the way, I do feel that in our industry, we have moved a little bit into this conversation frame where we're basically just talking to ourselves and saying, well, what we have is good enough, and we don't have to worry about the rest of the industry, and we're just going to be really good at this section in finance and whatever, and it's big enough. I completely disagree with that, because money is, if you think about money and finance, it's the stuff of civilizations, right? And we need to remember that finance was invented. So writing was invented because they needed a way to prove something financial, which is your object. The ancient Sumerians basically had to prove whose cow belonged to who and whose house belonged to who in order to have order in society, because we went from thousands to hundreds of people to thousands to eventually millions of people living within a community. How do I record that? And actually, from this idea of a property right came the world of finance because of trade and transaction, which is ultimately super social in construct, right? So even if, and so I tell to people, everything we do is a transaction. Even our conversation, it doesn't have to necessarily exchange money, but it's a transaction that we're doing. We're exchanging information, we're spending time, we're creating value of some sort, or maybe it's not valuable, but we're creating something that is a form of a transaction. We are transactional beings, right? And so that value exchange, we then ended up abstracting this form of money as a way to make it more universal. And that universality allowed someone across the world to do business with each other by not knowing who you are, but I can still do business with you because we have this one common social standard, which is a currency of some sort, right? And by the way, if we lose trust in that currency, we basically give up on that society. I mean, it's very much attached to this, right? So then going into sort of things like, whether it's gaming or consumer or entertainment, all of these things that bring us together as communities are actually forms of transaction, which frankly are kind of forms of value, which you could then translate into some kind of money or at least a value construct, right? Like I have 1 million fans, that may not translate into, a celebrity might have 1 million fans. He doesn't translate into a direct dollar value per follower, but he knows it's valuable and there's something attached to that, right? And so this is kind of, we need to teach people that there is something there, because also in the same way that when you understand it's valuable, which we inherently often do, we also tend to protect it, right? Or we try to protect our reputation for that reason, or we try to protect other things, right? So to me, we want to start off making it fun and bring people in. I think agents is that way to do it. One of the things that, we like to say to people now is that maybe the whole thing about the metaverse, we got it slightly wrong in terms of thinking that we would enter the metaverse, with our funny goggles and with our different outfits and, with interfaces. But now that AI agents are actually impacting our physical life, handling our calendar, making trades for us, doing stuff for us in real life, isn't it more like the metaverse is coming to us, right? And there's an interesting experience that anecdotal I want to share, is that the kind of people who are really good, at least the ones we see with sort of AI agents, are also the kind of people who tended to be really good with handling gaming simulations and gaming environments, where you have to deal with many players or many actions or many NPCs, and you have to multitask on multiple things, right? And actually, that's kind of what happens when you're running and orchestrating multiple agents, right? Or if you're running a guild with like 20 or 30 players and you want to sort of structure a raid in the game, actually, what is it? It's organization, it's management skills, right? Which you can now translate into agents and agent management. So I think they do very much tie together. But because it's something related to money, because now it's an asset and people trade, they're going to start learning about it. So, our children learn about money because they're trading Pokemon cards, not because you learn it in school. But what was the impetus? The impetus was something fun that then took them into something financial because they owned it, right? And I often give this example of my mom, she's a musician, and she'll never buy Bitcoin, not because she shouldn't, but because she just doesn't care. It's just not her thing, at least right now. But when we tokenize the Stradivarius, which is an expensive violin, she wouldn't be able to afford one by herself. But if she could buy a fractional aspect of it, she understood that was valuable. And at least for her and her community, it was value. And there's a lot of studies that show that you will learn things faster when you're emotionally vested in it. Kind of makes sense, right? Remember the times when you're in college and university and you basically were uninterested and basically 1 year you're in and you're out, right? Versus, I like this subject. You will learn it very quickly because you're into it. So it's wrapping something like finance into something that you have fun with, right? Because then you're emotionally vested. That's the goal, right? And I think we tried very hard in squeezing something sort of round, square peg and round hole type of thing. We didn't really sort of fully appreciate the financial aspect of it and the translation of that properly. We just said, hey, this has to be a beautiful looking game, but then we kind of ignored sort of how we introduce and teach the money bit. In fact, and then we went the other way. A lot of people went the other way and said, oh, you know what? Don't talk about money at all. Just make the game fun, and we just run blockchain in the back. Well, that obviously didn't work either, because the whole point was gone as well in terms of making it an asset, right? And so I think we're getting to this middle ground. Agents make it easier, but also we have the whole introduction of sort of onboarding with financial literacy and education inside these gaming environments. I mean, how many people on Polymarket now are thinking about money? Think about crypto as well, which is the ultimate form of gamified finance as a whole. How many people now look at politics? And how many people think about sort of treasury rates, and how many people looking at interest rates and understand QE? Which would have been unthinkable for a lot of people probably even 5 years ago.
I love being a part of these conversations, but then I've been very notorious in my life in terms of pulling the conversations from the set time, and Yat has been a victim of that a few times on stage.
I am sorry though, because I do have a hard stop. Apologies.
Yes. So we are at the end of the live stream. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Let me remind you that we go live every weekday. In the past, we have had guys, OGs like Mate from Bitcoin.com. We had Uncle Rockstar, who is one of the earlier devs. Today we have Reeve and Yat with us. This weekend we are going to have Michael Turpin, who will be talking about the market update and his amazing theory of the 4-year cycle. He still believes in it. Most of us are saying maybe, may not be. The next week we are going to have Sion and Robinson from Jupiter and Wormhole. And after that, the week after that, we are going to be talking about Islamic finance with Raymond from the Malaysian government. And then we will have Elja Boom, one of the earliest investors in BNB, and the list is on after that. So we are going to be live every day. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. Is there any last bit of words that you want to talk, say to people?
Yeah, so maybe very quickly.
Yes.
Apologies,
please.
I do have to go. But one very quick thing I will say is, if you're interested in agentic AI, HelloMinds.ai, we do have a $10 million builder fund for people. We've already started funding the first group of people, which we'll be announcing soon. And so if you want to learn and do stuff in agentic AI, come and join that program. Give it a go. By the way, it's not even about whether you use our product. Agentic AI is that next sort of, I guess, step change. And so if you're able to use that well, I think it's just good for your career in the future as well, regardless of whether you use our product or not.
Thank you. Reeve, any last?
Thank you, Yat.
I echo Yat's sentiments for sure. Dive into AI and learn it.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Yat. Thank you, Reeve. We would love to have you back again and discuss more on the crazy space that we are in. A month looks like a year, and a year looks like a decade in our space. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Yat. Take care. Have a good night. Thank you, Reeve. Have a great day ahead.
Thanks.